Since 2001 was released all those years ago, it built up a huge kind of cult following, didn't it? What was the reason for that, do you think?
I don't know. It's puzzled me. Of course, Stanley Kubrick's genius was the real reason, but it's obviously hit a lot of nerves. And it was slow to start. You know, when it came out originally, the first week, a lot of people thought it was a disaster. I can still remember one MGM executive saying, well, that's the end of Stanley Kubrick. And then slowly, not so slowly, it did build up, as you say, into a kind of cult. Perhaps the political climate, the time, the hippie movement, all these things.
I think it was kind of, there was a touch of the Emperor's New Clothes about it, though, Arthur, because, frankly, I didn't understand a lot of it, but I think people were afraid to admit that. You know, I mean, that black oblong thing.
The monolith, yes.
What was that, Arthur?
Well, I answered some of the questions in the new movie, but there's still quite a few left. And actually, when people ask me what the monolith is, I say it's the cosmic equivalent of a Swiss Army knife.
Which is a pretty obscure answer that you're making there, obviously.
Well, it can be anything it wants to be.
Or anything that the viewer wants to put on it.
Or anything that the intelligence behind it want it to do.
But you had no specific role for it. I mean, were you as bemused when you saw it as the rest of us?
Frankly, yes. Not really. But the ending was a surprise to me because Stanley and I were working on it right up to the very end. He was cutting and changing. So, in a way, it was novel to me. I had the general idea, of course, but the final version was, only about 24 hours before the movie was due to hit the screen.
So now the new one's come out, which is the sequel, 2010. Or 2010, or as I saw Barry Norman call it the other night, 8:10. You've sustained the monolith in this, have you?
Oh, yes. Yeah. It does some rather important things in this. And it's a good deal bigger. It's a few miles long.
Mm. Yes, and I suppose in the next sequel it's going to be even bigger, is it?
Thanks for the suggestion.
Yeah. Now, are you turning a bit like Hitchcock? Because you've got a role in this.
In fact, I appear in the movie twice. The first time, I'm a bum on a park bench behind the White House. Incidentally, President Reagan flew over in his helicopter while we were shooting that. And
ruined the entire shot.
No, well, we knew he was coming, of course, and we just waited till the chopper had landed behind us. And I appear a second time with Stanley Kubrick in the movie. But if you blink, you'll miss us both.
Yeah, but a bit like this show. You know, it just strikes me that you're not getting power-crazed or starstruck or anything. We're not going to see you appearing in all the movies based on your stories, are we?
I hope not.
Now, your fiction has always been very close to fact. In fact, it seems to have anticipated fact. I mean, communication satellites and everything else you predicted long before they actually happened. Is it a gift of second sight? Is it an intelligent guess? Is it just speculation?
Well, I like to call it extrapolation. I mean, I've always been interested in science, and I've always been interested in exploring mentally and physically. That's one of the reasons why I took up skin diving, because I like to do some exploring myself. And I was born a little too early to do any space exploring, so I started exploring the sea. And much of my fiction has been an intellectual exploration of possible ideas.
Have you ever been called a crackpot? I mean,
you
yes,
remember...
Often.
But not often nowadays.
No, because you've been too right too often. But, I mean, remembering, said, the charity of the gods, somebody like Eric Van Daniken, you know, with spaceships coming out from under pyramids in Peru. I mean, there is always a danger, isn't there, that you will go too far and be accused of hyperbole. Well,
I don't think in my fiction... I've written some fiction which was fantasy, but then it's obvious that I didn't believe it, or that it is fantasy as opposed to science fiction. There is a distinction between the two. I mean, science fiction is something that could happen as far as we know in the universe. Fantasy is something which couldn't happen, as far as we know, but sometimes the frontier shifts.
But do you think the fact that your early training is the thing that enables you to guess better than most other science fiction writers?
Well, the best science fiction writers, even if they're not scientists, have a good understanding of science, and that is essential. Otherwise, you'll just write nonsense, which, of course, often happens.